Have you ever watched somebody defend an explanation so thin you could see through it and thought, if a stranger said that to you, you'd have been so mad or laughed him out of the room? But somehow, if it comes from your person, your pastor, your group, suddenly it deserves another chance. Or 10. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I'm Rachel. Now, I had lunch the other day with a friend and we got to talking about people who will accept almost anything. A lie, a deflection, an explanation that doesn't hold together for more than 10 seconds, as long as it's coming from somebody that they have already decided they trust. Not because they're stupid. We already did that video. This one's different. It's about something a little more human and honestly, a little scarier. It's not stupidity, it's loyalty. Loyalty is kind of a funny thing. We usually treat it as a virtue, and sometimes it absolutely is. It keeps families together. It keeps friendships alive. It's the reason people show up for each other when life goes sideways. But every virtue has got a shadow side, and loyalty's is a pretty big one. The second it stops being something you value and starts becoming who you are, your brain quietly changes jobs. It stops asking whether something's true and starts asking how to make it fit. That's when things get weird. Have you ever noticed how forgiving we are when somebody belongs to our side? Now, your kid does something stupid, he's going through a phase. Somebody else's does the same thing, future inmate. Rules for thee, but not for me, in miniature. Nobody wants to admit that loyalty and evidence aren't the same currency. You can be smart as hell about everything else in your life and still go completely soft the second the person in question is yours. Your team, your family, your guy. Ask yourself honestly, would you extend a stranger the same grace you extend to the person you're loyal to? Most of us wouldn't, and most of us know it. This isn't new. Kings have had this problem as long as there have been kings. Every court in history has people standing a little too close to the throne, nodding at things they knew weren't true because disagreeing would have cost them something. We just don't call it a court anymore. We call it a comment section. Now, to be fair, some of this loyalty isn't loyalty at all. It's math. There's always a piece of any following that's there because proximity pays. Standing close to power, wealth, or fame and being loud about your devotion to it tends to get rewarded. Belief makes a really good costume, and sometimes it's not actually a good one. Sometimes it's a clown costume. To be honest, I almost respect that version. Almost. At least people understand it's a transaction. Mark Twain had a line for it. Dead over 100 years and still roasting people better than most on Twitter. All you need is ignorance and confidence, he said, and success is sure. The version that should actually worry you is the one with nothing to gain except belonging. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a German theologian who was eventually executed for resisting the Nazis, struggled with exactly this decades ago. He understood something really uncomfortable about human nature. He said that stupidity is more dangerous than evil, because evil at least knows what it's doing. Not because people suddenly become less intelligent, but because once loyalty grabs our identity, thinking takes a back seat. His argument basically comes down to this. Power itself spreads a kind of stupidity through everybody caught in its orbit, not just the people running things. This isn't a political problem, it's a human one. It lives with regular people defending something that is actively working against them without even a flicker of hesitation, because your brain decides who to trust before it decides what's true. And once somebody becomes your person, every fact has to fight its way through your loyalty before it even gets considered. The facts don't get a vote until after the verdict's already in, which would be a fascinating quirk of the human brain if it weren't currently ruining every family gathering in America. Nobody wants to be the person who got taken, so instead of admitting it, a lot of people would rather double down and defend the con than ever say out loud, I fell for it. I have been watching a lot of documentaries about cults lately. Yeah, I know, I lead a very exciting life. Try not to be jealous. And, the things that keep coming up, Scientology, prosperity gospel, religions in general. Pick your poison. They have all got the same fingerprints on them. Doubt doesn't get treated as normal human reaction. It gets treated as an attack. Outside information gets dismissed before it's even heard. Not argued with, just waved away. Criticism is betrayal. Your suffering gets explained as your own lack of faith. And the leader's wealth, which should probably raise a few eyebrows, gets held up as proof that he is blessed instead of proof that something's off. Nothing says blessed like a private jet and a mansion, purchased entirely on other people's food and rent money. Sound familiar? I've even had actual human beings tell me that my cancer was about my doubt, my lack of faith. Think about that, as if a diagnosis is a report card on my soul. Honestly, if that is how your God operates, punishing people for asking questions, that doesn't make me a doubter. It makes your God kind of an ass. And I don't believe that's how God or our creator or the universe, whatever you want to call it, actually is. It's not only doubt that gets waved away either. It's the gap between what a group says it stands for and what it actually defends. Every belief system has a code it claims to live by. Kindness, honesty, humility, family values, whatever it is. And every one of them eventually gets tested by its own members defending something that breaks that code. Usually the people who claim to represent it the best. Almost nobody clocks the contradiction in real time. The loyalty gets there first. Now, nobody wakes up intending to become a hypocrite. Nobody says, today I think I'll abandon my principles. It just happens, one tiny justification at a time. Now, I'm not going to tell you everywhere I think this shows up. I just want you to notice the shape of it wherever you find it, including, every once in a while, in yourself. There's an actual name for what happens next. Once somebody's publicly committed to a belief and the evidence starts stacking up against them anyway. Psychologists call it cognitive dissonance. Leon Festinger spent years studying it. Once we have committed ourselves to some belief or some person, new evidence doesn't change our minds. It just makes us dig in harder and defend it more. Because changing course doesn't mean you're changing your mind. It means admitting you were fooled. And who likes to admit that? The human brain will perform some genuinely Olympic-level mental gymnastics before it volunteers for that. We are amazing creatures. We have mapped the human genome. We have landed robots on Mars. We invented the air fryers and the internet, for crying out loud. But oh my God, admitting we backed the wrong person? Apparently that is where we draw the line. So, here's a question before you get too comfortable thinking about somebody else. Who did you picture while I was talking? A politician? A preacher? A celebrity? Somebody in your own family or a neighbor? Whoever it was, there's a decent chance somebody else just pictured your side while you were picturing theirs. That is the trap. We all think that we're the observer. Almost nobody thinks they're the participant. Humans have this incredible ability to recognize bias as long as it's happening in somebody else. This is where I stop pointing at other people, because that's actually the easy part. The harder question is where you and I do this to ourselves. Where do you go quiet because speaking up would cost you a friendship, a family dinner, a place in the group chat? It's the same mechanism. You're just running on you instead of somebody else, which is probably why I keep reading the Stoics and the Buddhists and the Taoists, people who have been asking these questions for thousands of years. Not because they tell me what to think, but because they keep reminding me to look at how I'm thinking. Epictetus spent his whole life reminding people to examine their own judgments and actions before worrying about everybody else's, pointing out the difference between what's yours to control and what isn't. Not because other people aren't wrong, sometimes they absolutely are, but because the only mind you'll have real authority over is your own. You don't control who someone else follows or what they excuse or refuse to look at. That is theirs. What's yours is smaller and harder. Your own attention, your own judgment, who you trust and why. So, let me try to save you a little bit of stress. Stop trying to win the argument. You're not going to. And getting angry every time you don't isn't strategy. It's just volunteering to stay mad on somebody else's schedule. My only goal these days is to say somebody who still checks her own thinking. One of the most freeing realizations that I've had is that I don't have to win every argument. Watch your own loyalties the same way you watch everyone else's. Ask who you defend past the point you should and why. The Clash asked the real question back in 1982. Should I stay or should I go? And a lot of times the answer is just go. I try to own it when I have gotten something wrong. I don't always like doing it, but I'll try. That's really all any of us can ask ourselves. And we need to learn to protect our peace without pretending the problem isn't real. Stepping back is not the same as looking away. You're allowed to limit how much of somebody else's crap you are going to carry every day and still care about the outcome. The opposite of blind loyalty isn't cynicism. It's just being able to say, I might have this wrong, without your whole identity falling apart. All we can do is stay curious, check our own assumptions, and stay willing to change our minds when the evidence points elsewhere. None of this fixes the world by the end of the week. Philosophy rarely does. It just makes it a little harder to lie to yourself and keeps you from becoming the thing you can't stand watching in other people. A little more curiosity and a lot less certainty would make all our lives a little simpler. Thanks for hanging out with me today. Go enjoy your coffee or whatever you're drinking. Question something you believe, preferably before questioning your neighbor. Take care of you, and I will see you the next time. Bye-bye. Oh, and I have no idea where Reggie is, by the way. He was over by the gate a little while ago, and I don't know where he's at. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.